Hi, guys, and welcome back to The Thoughtful Advocate. I'm your host, Elizabeth Teo. Now, we all want to change the world, but most of us don't know where to start. So I'm sitting down with the Thoughtful Advocates, the people who are turning hope into action. And today's Thoughtful Advocate is Niha Elety. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited. I know we've connected over social media, and now we're face to face, which is very exciting. And she's a climate activist, designer, and storyteller. And honestly, a wonderful artist. I love your painted series, where you highlight your culture. I don't know how you do it. Live here. Oh my God, it's insane. So she's insanely talented as well. So we're going to jump into the show and tell segment where you literally do a little show and tell, just like we did in elementary school, of an item that's near and dear to your heart.
I actually recently traveled to India and filmed a short film, a documentary in the forests of Jharkhand, which is the state that's in the northeast, and not a lot of people travel there, even within India. And during my travels, I got to meet farmers, craftsmen, and artists. And I recently brought back, there's one of the paintings up there, but another painting here. And these are by Sarai, Indigenous artists. And everything is painted with natural colors. So all of this is different colorful rocks that they've painted with. And this is thousands and thousands of years of artwork. And they're teaching and making this intergenerational movement between the older artists and now the younger generation. And I just thought it was such a beautiful piece of an idea of what the future could be. So this has become one of my new favorite things for my travels, for sure.
That's amazing. You said it's painted using rocks? Is that what
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So they take, I don't know, how does it work? Do they take the colors from the rocks, different colors?
Yeah, they break down the rocks and they take the pigments from the rocks and they paint.
That's amazing. So, truly eco-friendly because it's purely set from the earth. But I'm sure they don't call it that unless they know they're branding. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like only now are they branding things that way so that people recognize that what they're doing is eco-friendly, but I don't think they did that before.
Yeah, definitely not traditionally. I feel like a lot of traditional cultures, they've always been eco-friendly and environmentally friendly because they've always worked with the earth and hand in hand use natural things, always, reuse. And I'm Chinese, so a lot of my family hoards a bunch of plastic yogurt containers and takeout containers. And yeah, we just reuse it again and again. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Niha. And we're going to jump in to the adventure begin. So this is gonna set the stage for us to know a bit more about you. So what's one childhood memory from Hyderabad that still shapes the way you see the world? And please correct me if I said that wrong as well.
No, you said it perfectly. Yeah, so I did grow up going back and forth between Hyderabad and living there for about 10 years of my life, but I think there's way too many memories, but one childhood memory that sticks out to me is when I was living with my grandparents, and every day my grandmother would take me to the balcony and we would get our vegetables with this little basket, and we would put the basket down and the vegetable vendor would come put vegetables in it and sell it in that way. And that was very interesting to me to see a vendor, most likely probably a farmer as well, kind of directly selling to my grandmother at in her balcony. And then I remember that same day, there's a garment called a lungi in the south of India, which is essentially a cloth that men wear and tie as a skirt. And my grandfather had this really old one, and my grandmother would always be sewing and stitching new things. And I also really wanted to sew and stitch new things. So basically I just wanted to be my friend when I was younger. And so I took his old, this is when I was 5, and I cut it up and I stitched it into this crop top and this skirt. And then I didn't know that my grandmother had friends over, and I walk out in that outfit, and then her face drops and she's like, "What are you doing? What did you cut up?" And "Oh my God, what are you wearing?" But I would say from that, what I realized is from a very young age, I was exposed to just innately sustainable things, just in the way that the world around me was created or that I was living in. And so that has also helped shape my view of the world and kind of what I think is not as well known or maybe practices that we just have forgotten from the past, even from our nostalgic past. So yeah, I think those kind of stayed with me as core memories for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've seen TikToks of like in other countries, if they want to order takeout, they'll have like rope and you can order, if you live in a high rise, they'll just like somehow get it to you. And I think that's amazing that they're doing that with like fresh vegetables because I mean, we need that kind of delivery, especially for people who live in like condos and stuff. So like, I feel like that'd be so convenient because I remember I lived in a condo and they wouldn't like if I ordered a delivery like for groceries, they'd make me go all the way downstairs to get it because like for
Yeah.
security reasons. So like, other countries do it, so why
I
can't
know. How can I feel like it's actually like more secure or something. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially for people with disabilities too. Like, what if they can't, like, like get down easily? Like, I think it would just make so much more sense. So someone needs to get on that, whoever out there. But yeah, and so how old were you when you made that crop top? Did
I
you
was
say?
5 years old.
Gosh. So you're already slaying and like making garments at the age of 5, which is
Yeah, I don't know
crazy to
the
me.
best garment. It was like me literally hand stitching just like a few sleeves and
Yeah.
calling it an outfit, but
I mean, but still, like, that's amazing. That's everyone has to start somewhere. 5 years old is still a huge feat. Amazing. So I read this in, I think, on your website. So at 11, you left the US for India. How did that move change everything? And can you tell us, like, why you moved?
yeah, so I was living in Dallas, Texas up until the age of 11. And my parents, they really wanted to move back because there was this quite a few like family friends that had moved back and a few family members, or a lot of family members actually in India that we just wanted to go back and live with. I think my parents just had this internal, like, I want to be able to move back and be with my grandparent or with their parents. And there's always like this internal struggle when you move from another country where you don't feel fully here, fully there. Like not really your identity, but more so like you feel kind of you don't know which place you want to live in and you want the best of both worlds in some way. So my parents just wanted us to move back and kind of live there with a lot of our family. And so that was the reason I moved back. And it actually ended up being important for us to be there because unfortunately my mom's sister passed away. So within 3 months of us moving, which was actually, it almost felt like a sign from, like a higher power to be there for our cousins and kind of take them in as I mean, we always would consider them siblings, but almost like another set of siblings. So for us, I think it was just in some ways divine timing in that way. But yeah, I think overall, in terms of how that move changed everything for me, a lot of it was just through how I saw the world. I think growing up in the US, at least when it came to sustainability and accessibility and even the feeling of like closeness to other people and community, I grew up actually just not feeling super close to the people around me. I think I was the only Indian kid in my grade, but that's also elementary school. I think high school ends up being a little different here, but yeah, that was my upbringing, but I did have a few friends around. But overall, like I just didn't feel super close to the people around me. I also felt like, at least in terms of sustainability, like all we really knew was to recycle, to plant trees. And anytime I walked into a mall, I genuinely thought machines made clothes. I was like, there's no way a human could have made this many clothes. We have machines to make a lot of things. I was like, there's no way that like a human has made all of this. And that was like my idea. Like I did know handmade things existed, but I thought those were more like luxury items or like things that people
Yeah.
tailored specifically to themselves. So I guess that was kind of my idea. And then when I moved to India, I learned a lot about just actually being able to talk to the farmers that you're buying from, which I think is like the one thing that is so incredible is that you actually get to interact with your farmers that bring the vegetables and end up selling them in the cities. Also with the artisans, block printers, weavers, tailors, there's like such a huge culture around wanting to create your own pieces of clothing and being able to do that just with the way that those practices have been preserved, which I think we're lucky that our country and culture was able to preserve, because I know for a lot of people that wasn't the case either. And then also just being able to feel this closeness to the people around me, the sense of community, and like not really feeling this individualism as much as you do here. So I think that's kind of things that I really loved and that I wanted to kind of pick up. Yeah.
Wow, that a journey for sure. I'm sorry about your aunt, but yeah, I really feel like that was, I don't know what you believe in, God, the universe, like way of bringing you guys together before she left this place. But yeah, like individualism in the US is, or North America in general, is just really big because I know in Asia, they think like family first and working together. And I think that's really prevalent in your story as well. Like knowing your farmers and artisans, people who can make your clothes. I don't know who makes my clothes, especially when I went to the mall. I went to Forever 21 and bought all these fast fashion items. I mean, a lot of these clothes are made in China. So, like, you just don't know. But it's great that they actually have a community there where you can know people actually make and grow the food that you eat. I think that's so important. And something that's quite lost unless you go to farmers markets, which is one way to connect, which is really great. But not everyone has access to that. So definitely something that needs to be worked on. And growing up in Dallas, Texas, I'm sure it was very like white populated. I don't really see a lot of other populations. But my dad, he recently moved maybe like 2 years ago to Houston, and he said there was actually a big Vietnamese community there. So I was pretty surprised by that.
Houston has like a very diverse population.
I did not know that. And someone I met also lived in Texas. I don't know where exactly, but they said they did not have recycling. Like their program got canceled or something. I guess not enough funding or interest, which is crazy not to have recycling.
I feel like composting should be everywhere, but I feel like
Yeah, it's like
I think recycling is like next level.
recycling, like you think would be everywhere in North America, but it's not. And compost, it's on the lower tier because it's not, well, in Canada, at least in Ontario, in Toronto specifically, it's not mandated to actually have compost in high rises, which is sad because, so much food waste that could be turned into good soil. I will jump into my next question. So you moved back to India at 11, and then when did you go back to the US?
Back for college. So when I was
Okay.
18, and then I did my undergrad in North or NC State and UNC, so North Carolina State University and UNC Chapel Hill in biomedical engineering. So very unrelated to what I'm currently doing today. But I think being in like an intersectional major from the beginning has honestly kept me in that like intersectional mindset, just with the way that I create and like the way I've even built like the career that I wanted for myself, or even just the way that I try to think about a lot of these issues. So I think in that sense, it was definitely helpful. But yeah, that's when I ended up moving back to the US.
Okay, so you moved back. So you moved back for college, but you moved to North Carolina. Is that correct? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's hard to search up, but
That's really awesome to intersect STEM and
yeah.
art as well because it's so important. I mean, obviously, biomedical engineering is so important and needed. Did you always know that you were going to go into biomedical engineering? Were you like kind of urged by your parents to go that route, or was that something that you had an interest in like as a child?
Yeah, I think I always had like some level of interest in medicine or medicine related fields, but I definitely did feel like that pressure to go into that field because of parents and just, societal expectations. Because my parents were like, oh, you'll basically be a doctor and an engineer, and you can still go to med school. And I'm like, okay,
Two
yeah,
birds with one stone. I guess
yeah,
three
like,
birds.
wow, it did sound good to me too. I was like, oh, that sounds like a really cool thing. And I actually wanted to go to fashion school. I even applied, and my mom was actually encouraging, but sometimes, parents, like they'll change their mind one
Yeah.
day they're so supportive and the next day they'll like change their mind completely. And I was like, Mom, you literally said that I could go to fashion school yesterday and now you're suddenly like changing your mind. I decided to pursue biomedical engineering, but I think on the side, I was creating content online and still engaging with my passion for fashion and sustainability at the same time, and kind of posting and getting that out through channels like social media and Instagram. And so that kind of kept me going and exploring. And I even like did create a fashion or like a fashion collection for like the school fashion show that only the fashion pages what's it called, presenting in, but I just decided to add myself into it, and they let me. They let
They're
me
like,
like
she's one of us.
because I just wanted to see if it even was something I could do. But yeah, I tried to pursue it on the side, which I think is something that a lot of us started doing even more of in the past 5 to 6 years after social media started getting really big.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, parents can have a huge influence on your career, especially Asian parents. I know how it is. Obviously, they wanted a secure future for you, I'm sure. And, it seems like you're doing pretty well. That's great. I know like your heart's also deeply involved in fashion. And I mean, at 5 years old, you were sewing your own clothes. Oh, clearly you have a huge passion for it. So I'm glad you did take the time to, in the sense, like put yourself first and like go that route too, because I think it's important to, follow your passion as well. So did you start social media when you were in your university? Is that
At the age of 19. So it's almost been, or 18 even, maybe. Yeah, 18. It's almost been a decade for me. I'm turning 28 in November. I'm like, whoa, like that's crazy to me that it's been that long.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm 29, so we're just like a year apart. But it's crazy. The social media game is crazy, and that I think you're killing it. So like,
Thank you. I think you're
thanks. I mean, I've been off for honestly like 2 years. Like once I got a full-time job, I was like, well, I don't have time or energy for this. Goodbye.
It is so much.
Lot
I
of
feel
work.
like I've also kind of like slowed down, honestly, and like started using it as a portfolio recently. So like any cool projects, things that are interesting in my life, I'll post, but I haven't been as much of that content creator as I used to be. So
It's hard. I mean, burnout is real, and you work a full-time job as well. So I totally get it. So we're about to jump into your founded organization, so Tega Collective and Understory. Can you give a current snapshot of what project right now? I know you do content creation on the side as well. What project right now makes you jump out of bed in the morning while working full time?
I feel like I'm caught between so many different things. And sometimes I'm like, am I really giving my 100%? But that's when it's incredible to have other people and a team to work with. So I will say with Understory, I think that's been really exciting and invigorating for me because I do have a co-founder. Her name is Harjas Graywal. She's like a human rights activist and has worked with, she's like won the Diana Award, has had a really cool like 3-4 year stint with the UN as like a youth advisor. So she's done a lot and even worked in the venture space as well. So she also is very multi-hyphenated and has worked in a bunch of different spaces. And I think those experiences from her side and my side really helped shape Understory. Her human rights background, my climate background, I think they really are one and the same. And those are the stories that we wanted to tell in the most protected and hopefully awareness raising way with just underrepresented, underknown stories when it comes to climate solutions or even communities and craft. A lot of that actually stemmed from my love for interacting with and sharing and raising awareness about Indigenous communities and knowledge, which I'm doing through Tega Collective, through creating clothing, but also wanting to do through Understory by bringing a lot of this community knowledge to the surface through storytelling in ways that they are proud of and that they want to showcase. So recently did the documentary in Jharkhand where we got to interact with a lot of those incredible community members there. And I think that's been really exciting for me because we're currently in post-production and we're doing a lot of the editing and adding music and color grading and hopefully looking to premiere it at a few film festivals. So that's been a really exciting one. And I think generally like bringing Understory together, helping build that online community and even put out a magazine hopefully in the next few months. So there's a lot that I'm really excited about. And then I love that I can lean on so many people. We've had so many people reach out ever since we launched saying, hey, we want to be writers or we want to contribute or hey, I'd love to like create the graphics or is there a way that we can like collaborate and host an event like during Climate Week, stuff like that. And that's been so exciting because I'm like, wait, we don't have to do everything ourselves. Like everyone can contribute to this and we can all kind of work together. And so I think that's kind of also brought another lens and another way that I could build community is like directly by working with people and creating together. So I think that's what I've been liking about it.
That's amazing. Yeah, that you found community through your organizations. I think that's so important and something that's really needed nowadays, especially with social media, which can be great at bringing people together, but can also really isolate us as well. So I think that's amazing that you're not doing this all by yourself because that'd be too much. So that's awesome. And now I understand your guys' organization title, Understory, like telling undertold stories. That's amazing. I'm totally behind that. I think that's so important. There's so many stories that are just not told because maybe they don't capture enough attention or they're not important enough or whatever. So that's so important. And it seems like the organizations that you co-founded also go hand in hand, which is really great at the same time. So that's awesome. And the documentary, do you know, like, is there like a launch date or anything like that?
Yeah, we're hoping to wrap up production by like October, November. And then from there, we'll have to take the film festival route and try to see which ones it qualifies for and things like that. So yeah, we might do a friends and family private screening, which I think is allowed because I know some film festivals, like you have to premiere it there. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully at the end of the year, we'll be able to host a screening of some kind, if not early next
Yeah,
year.
that'd be sick. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So when did you film this? Like, did you take off like a chunk of time off work to go see
Yeah,
part of?
so luckily for me, I have something at work where I'm able to technically work remotely for a month anywhere. I do work remotely in like
That's nice.
the US, but to leave internationally and work remotely, I can do that. But at the same time, my specific manager's like, well, I want you to take half that time off. So use your PTO for half of it. So I was like, okay, fine. So yeah, basically that's how I was able to do all of this. What's really,
Amazing.
they also have volunteer time off for up to 8 days. So I also was like, hey, this technically comes under that. You know, we're
So true.
offering a lot of our time to these things. And yeah, that's how I was able to do.
That's awesome. No, that's really great that you find a way to balance your passions and your job as well, which is so important. So we'll jump into your origin. I feel like a lot of content creators and just creators in general or entrepreneurs can relate to this. But who believed in you when others said you were too much? Have you ever felt that way, especially in the beginning?
I've definitely felt that way. I was like one of those kids that I think it was so funny. My mom made this. I love my mom, and she is actually a very supportive, encouraging person. But it was kind of funny because when I moved to India, she was like, "Oh, like I'm kind of glad you moved because I feel like you turned out to be a lot cooler than you would have been if you stayed there." And I was like, "Mom, that's
Oh my
so
God.
first of all, that's so rude. Do you think I was a weirdo?" And they,
That's
but
like
I will
double-handed compliment.
really backhanded. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
glad you think I'm cool now, but wow. But I will say, yeah, I was a bit of an oddball, honestly. Growing up, like I randomly just take a shovel and start digging in my backyard. And I was like, I want to build a pond and I want to fill it with koi fish. And I would get my friends to do it, and everyone would be like, wait, what are you doing? How can you just start digging a hole in the middle of our backyard and not tell us? So I would just do random things like that, honestly. And like I made my friend make ice cream with me once, and then I just watched her as she churned it. So I was always like one of those people who just was impulsively like wanting to do all of these things. And so I think I definitely could have seen how that might have been a little too much, just really crafty and wanting to do hands-on stuff. But I will say, like, even with that jokingly backhanded compliment, my family really and like closest friends have honestly always been so encouraging and never made me feel like I was too odd or like too much for wanting to do the things that I do. I think they always knew that like me wanting to do all of these things would take me somewhere and take me far eventually. So that's what I always loved. And they kind of reframed it as like, oh, I think you're unconventional, which I think is a compliment. So I definitely appreciated that. And I think that's also kind of what I realized is I was just very self-assured from a really young age. Like I didn't really waver too much from who I am. Feel like a lot of people feel like they need to rebrand themselves every few years just based on external things. And I think I've stayed pretty core and true to who I am growing up. And I really attribute that to my family for making me feel good in that for sure.
That's amazing that you didn't have to hide that part of you because I think we're all weird in some way, and that makes for the best content creators because, you're unique and you stand out that way. And I think that's amazing. I've always wanted a koi pond in my backyard, so maybe you should have went into landscaping to come to like a little pond.
I actually like printed out flyers and I stuck it around my entire neighborhood. And I was like, we are the kids landscapers. Hire us to landscape your fence. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so that was a previous career path.
We wanted to be a landscape.
That's amazing. I love watching Architectural Digest and like all of those
Oh, same here.
yeah, it's like amazing. So that's awesome. I'm glad your parents and family were really supportive of that, letting you express yourself, because I feel like it can be hard when parents are really strict and you kind of have to conceal that. But because you were allowed to express yourself in that way, I feel like that's just freeing in so many ways. So that kind of answers the second question here. That I do want to know, what did they think about your interest in sustainability and fashion? I know you said your mom was supportive for the most part before she changed her mind the next day, but yeah.
I will say, like, yeah, I don't think my parents were strict. I think they were strict to a point where it made sense, but not so strict that I would turn out to be this rebellious child. And I think that's a fine line that a lot of people try to tread when they're raising their kids. So I do feel lucky in the sense that I do think I was reined in when I needed to be, but also given the space that I was given. But in terms of like my interest with sustainability and fashion, I think my mom was always super encouraging, but it would always be like, okay, like, do it on the side and like see how it is. And then maybe you can like take it somewhere. And so that's kind of how I ended up getting into doing this and like putting my work out on the internet and making it like doing a lot more content creation work. And then, of course, wanting to build more from that, from the community that I created, and wanting to create Tega Collective, which is the fashion brand that I started, and then eventually Understory as well. But I will say, like, yeah, I think they always saw it as like something that was more of a hobby or something that I could pursue on the side. But I think now they see the value in me doing what I'm doing and taking time out of my day to create hopefully real impact around the world with other people who are doing the same. So I think they've gotten more supportive over the years as they've seen like the way other people have also started to make, something of themselves through this work.
Yeah, I feel like being a full-time content creator, if you ever wanted to go that route, or, full-time founder, co-founders, the whole job itself, it's more normalized these days. Like even little kids say, hey, I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up, like a TikToker or whatever. And yeah, but I feel like with Asian parents, especially in these creative routes, you really have to show them the numbers. If you're bringing in any dough, especially for jumping in full time.
They were like, you need to make at least 1.5x what you're currently making for us to feel not even it, but for us to even start thinking about you. Yeah, I mean, I know it's different for each person, but yeah, that's the thing is like you have to show them the money. You also have to show them like, hey, these are like really cool milestones that I've reached. And yeah, I think that's definitely what I've noticed with Asian parents too.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally common for it. Okay, so we'll jump into the journey. Tell us, how did Tega Collective go from an idea to reality?
Yeah, for sure. I've always really wanted to have a fashion brand of my own. I kind of got into this space from an outsider's perspective because a lot of people who go to fashion school are not really taught about sustainability, and the frameworks that are used to teach and like just what their journeys are just very different. I think having an external lens and understanding how fashion and the industry is actually detrimental to our environment is really important. I was able to get that understanding by being outside of the industry. For me, I'd always wanted to start a fashion brand, but then, of course, make sure that it's inherently sustainable. And I was actually on a panel in 2020 with a few environmentalists in India, and they were actually Adivasi environmentalists. Adivasi are the indigenous communities of India, all of the different tribal communities there. There were a few environmentalists on that panel with me, and they talked about a lot of their art, a lot of their craft being appropriated and mass produced within India and even outside of India. There are these Warli paintings, which are stick figure looking paintings that are quite common, but you see them printed on bed sheets, on pillowcases, on clothing, and none of it is made by the Warli community, nor do they make profit from it, but it's pretty common to see. And so from that, I think that's where the idea really came from. And I was like, wait, why don't we collaborate with indigenous communities and actually have clothing made by these indigenous communities and bring profits back to them instead of it like going to, mass manufacturers? And so that's where that idea came from. And then I took it to reality because I kind of collaborated with a specific community that they put me in touch with that was already creating goods, but they weren't creating clothing. And I was like, this could be really interesting for us to kind of create silhouettes and then for them to do what they do best with the actual craft itself. So we collaborated with the Lambani tribe. They have traveled, or they're a bit more nomadic, and they've traveled across from the northwest to like the south of India. And they're known for their embroidery, their mirror work, their coins and cowrie shells. And so we collaborated with them for the first one, and really a lot of the colors and the embroideries themselves are really dreamt up by them. And then we kind of dreamt up the silhouettes and married it together. But that's how we really were able to bring that idea into reality. And then, of course, also making sure that they're compensated, credited, and all of the things that I think are you and collaborated with as well. All of these things that are just not really inherent to a lot of fashion brands. And then making sure that they are compensated in a way that makes sense. So we have this profit sharing model at Tega. So like 15% of the profits go back to the communities on top of, what the wages that they already get for creating the garments themselves. And this way, I think it kind of more equitably distributes wealth within a fashion brand, because a lot of artisans, garment workers are considered like lower skilled labor, even though they're the ones creating the clothes. And we would not have clothes if it weren't for them. And so this was just a way for us to at least start that conversation or start that model of being able to see how we could bring a bit more equity into this space. But yeah, that's kind of how the idea came to reality.
That's amazing. And I'm sure there's a lot of logistics that also have to go into shipping and this. You probably have people on your team that hopefully know those logistics better. I think that's amazing. Like going into, because of your background with biomedical engineering and marrying that with your love for fashion, I think that's huge. I know because I was on a path to become a doctor. So I know when applying for medical school, they also look for people who don't go the traditional pre-med route. They want different perspectives and ideas. And I think that's really awesome. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into running Tega. What do you think is the hardest part of running a fashion brand, especially when you're working with communities? Do you think like being like so far away from them is hard?
So yes, that is the hardest part, is not being on ground all the time. Like I do go back to India at least once or twice a year for at least 1 to 2 months. Luckily with the PTO and things that I have, I try to maximize that as much as I can and visit the communities and make sure that I can be on ground when I can. But yeah, I would say it's the communication and feeling like we're stretching out the time between the beginning of the launch to the production and all of this stuff. So I think that definitely makes it a bit difficult. And then, of course, just the current economic climate that we're in with tariffs and, also people acting a bit recession-y, and it makes sense, right? Like the way that people are purchasing. So I think that's just been difficult because, yeah, not enough people are purchasing kind of from sustainable brands because they lie in the middle of luxury and fast fashion. And there's only so many people that are kind of in that target market in the middle. So I think that's something that we've and other sustainable brands have been dealing with and trying to figure out how to stay afloat, how to raise awareness, and maybe even rebrand ourselves in a way. I know there's this one brand that I think is doing really well, but they're kind of going this whole like girly pop TikTok, like Scandinavian scarf, like mini skirt kind of route. And I think that's like capturing attention. And it's like, oh, by the way, they're sustainable. So it really, what I've realized is like, you really have to lead with your designs first, because that is what people are going to be wearing. That's what's going to make them feel good. And it's like, oh, they happen to be sustainable. So yeah, really just trying to understand how we can tread that line a little bit better.
Yeah, the tariffs must be a pain, honestly. Like I've heard of people being charged like hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're shipping out of the US, and it's like ridiculous. So yeah, I'm sure it's difficult right now, but hopefully things will get better. Fingers crossed. But I think that's so true what you said, that the fashion brands that are leading with their designs are the ones that are making it. And if it is good for the planet and the people, that's like a bonus to people right now, especially in this economy. People are thinking a lot more about their dollar than anything else, which is understandable. So we'll dive into navigating storms now for the sake of time. So we already talked about how we work 9 to 5, but how do you find time for rest? Like, are you always constantly working? Like, as soon as you clock out, you're on your laptop, ready to go?
To give you a snapshot of my day, I try to wake up around like 7:30, and then I'll have calls with people in India, either about the short film or about the production going on. Do a lot of that, make my breakfast, whatever it is, up until like 9 a.m. And then my 9 to 5 kind of starts. And I'm doing that throughout the day. Whenever I have a little bit of downtime in between meetings, I'll have lunch, or I'll see if there's anything I can do for more of a personal, whether it's content creation, whether it's Tega or Understory, whatever it is. If there's any time for me to do that. Luckily, I work remotely. I think around like 5-ish is I'll try to take a break, make myself like a matcha or something, either go for like a workout class or maybe go on like a 45-minute walk or something like that. I really need to have that delineated break at that 5 p.m. mark, because otherwise it's way too much to just do that and get started with work again. But yeah, I'll definitely give myself at least an hour or two just to do that, like cook, eat dinner. And then I kind of have that like evening from maybe like 7 or 8 p.m. to like 11, where I'm blocking my time and kind of working on other things. I'm still figuring out what the best way is, because so many things pop up in a day, but I'll try to do one day Thega and then the next day do Understory in like those 3-hour blocks, just to make sure I'm getting some deep work in. And then content creation, I'll try to reserve that for the weekends, try to batch create a few things. And if there's anything that's more timely or pressing, say there's something in the news or there's something that just needs to be talked about at that moment, I'll try to like find a way to put in time to create content around that. But those are kind of how my days look like. And, sometimes I'll go and I'll co-work with a friend, or I will have an event that I need to go to that will hopefully help Understory or Thega or whatever it is. So yeah, I definitely make time, and I also try to delegate things to people on my team. So that definitely makes it more manageable.
That's good. You need reliable people. So important what you're
Yeah.
doing so much. Because I was about to say, when I'm on maternity leave right now, but when I was working my 9 to 5, I'm like dead by 1 p.m.
Yeah.
It's like the after lunch, like lull. I'm like, okay, well now I'm sleepy. Like I don't have enough energy. So for you to like go like start at 7:30 and then go till 5, I'm glad you're taking that break, like outside or doing something active, because I'm sure it helps you like re-energize. And yeah, but clearly you're passionate about what you do, and I think that will keep you going.
I will say in the evening, it's definitely work, but it doesn't feel as scary or daunting because it's a little bit more on your own timeline and what you're able
Exactly.
to do. So
Yeah, when it's your passion, it is still work, but it feels more aligned. So I think that's awesome. So do you ever catch yourself wanting something that contradicts your values? I know as ethical and sustainable content creators, we obviously live a bit of a different lifestyle. I'm sure you sometimes walk by a store and you see this really beautiful dress. Do you go and make it, or how do you kind of balance that?
yeah, have kind of made that mental shift of I only will really like things that kind of go with my personal style. So I'm not very driven by trends, which is good. Not everyone feels that way, right? A lot of people, like, their passion is not, clothing. And so they look elsewhere so that they can like look nice and feel put together and feel good about themselves. But I do feel like I know what I like. And so when I see something that catches my eye, I'm like, oh, wait, I really like this. But I think for me, what I tend to do is either I'm like, okay, is this something that I could maybe get something similar made when I go back to India? Or does this feel like something I could thrift for sure? Because there might be something out there that I could thrift. Or is this like an ethical brand that, perhaps has something similar? I definitely tend to like think about those alternatives whenever I see a pretty dress in a store. But I will say it's kind of not too difficult for me, because with a lot of brands just in Asia, we have such incredible and innovative designers that are already inherently sustainable, and that, inherently have like a less of a price tag because it's made where the source is. and the wages are like lower there, unfortunately. But that makes, designer handmade clothing just more accessible. And so I tend to find myself anyway purchasing from those brands, and it just makes it easier because they're very uniquely made. So yeah, I will say that's why it's not as difficult for me.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many talented like tailors and like seamstress is in like Asia. Like I know when my dad goes back to Malaysia, he gets his suits tailored and outfits made because it's cheaper as well. But I think that it's great that you go through all of those. It's kind of like seeing fit checks off a box or not. How do you deal with racism? So personally in Canada, I see a lot of like racist comments and just in general towards like brown people, specifically South Asian and Middle Eastern people. Like I go on TikTok and I'll see like just so many comments that are just like so unnecessary. Have you ever dealt with that and like how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I dealt with it. I feel lucky in the sense that, like, having grown up in both places, I've seen what it's like to feel like you're a part of your community and to not feel like you're a part of your community. And I think feeling like I'm a part of my community in India, like, kind of gives me a bit of strength in the sense where I'm like, okay, I know I belong somewhere. But yes, when I'm in the US, I definitely deal with racism, sometimes at restaurants, just in public spaces, or even online when it comes to talking about certain cultural practices, or even just seeing the way that other people appropriate ours. And it's definitely something that I feel like, I don't know if I just tend to sometimes ignore certain things that I feel like are not worth really, bringing up. But definitely, like, when I think something is worth it, I will bring it up if it feels like a safe enough space too, because you do have to like look at your safety first. But really, I think through storytelling, I've noticed it really opens people up to understanding other cultures and other spaces, whether it's through food, through fashion, whether it's through really incredible practices that you have, or maybe styling something in a certain way. Like, I have noticed storytelling is what really opens people up to understanding other cultures. And I think that's how I tend to deal with it in my life and hopefully make other people more open to it. But I know that there's certain people that are not going to change. And so I kind of don't really put my energy there. I just put it where I know it's going to make the difference.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking because there's only so much energy you have in 5 per day, clearly. So yeah, I think that's so important. And I think that's really beautiful how you said that you can combat that versus using storytelling. I think that's so important because I feel like when it comes to racism, a lot of the hate and maybe the fear is often from stereotypes. And when you don't see someone else as human, it can be, obviously very demeaning and it could lead to, all sorts of like hate. So to tell stories of people and to make them more human and more relatable and to even like learn something from another culture, I think it's so important. So, and definitely helps us feel more connected. And I think that's definitely something that's very needed. So thank you for that. So we'll jump into the treasure. And basically this is like insights, wisdom and tools. So I know you did talk a bit about some indigenous wisdom that, if they have like their own practices sometimes, for example, I'm sure like Shein does this all the time. It's where I see articles about them like copying some small artist and just like mass producing their clothing. Um, so I'm sure they do this to like indigenous like artwork as well. Um, so do you have any cultural wisdom, whether it be from Indian traditions or indigenous wisdoms, that you feel that Western environmentalism often misses?
Think a lot of it just comes down to the approach, I would say, is very interconnected and very like one with the world or one with nature, and just feeling very like understanding how everything feeds the other and everything is very reciprocal. Versus, I think with Western environmentalism, we kind of originally treated it in a way where there were a lot of so-called one-off problems that we solved, and then we invented a lot of these one-off solutions and would try to use them as silver bullets for something that's an issue that's become very large scale. And so I think what I've noticed, a lot of indigenous wisdom, cultural wisdom, just tells you that everything is connected and you can't really break things up or silo things. You do really need to be holistic in your approach with how you work with the environment. And that feels hard when it feels like this is like a global, large scale issue, but you realize that like a lot of localized efforts that make sense to the regions that you're in, and you see that repeatedly all over the world, that does end up scaling in a way. So I think it's really bridging that gap between feeling like we're dealing with this large scale issue, but it's like, okay, well, how can we do these things in a local way to bring that entire scale up? But that's kind of what I think it misses. And I feel like people are realizing that now slowly. And I'm hoping that we move towards listening to other perspectives and other voices. And that's kind of what we try to highlight with Understory as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important to not just put a blanket statement or a silver bullet for all these environmental issues, because it really does depend where you are in the world and the community that you're in. A lot of people I've talked to in our other episodes, they also say that working with the locals is so important because they know the terrain, they know, like, for example, if you're working with conservation, like how to track the animals, they just know so much more. And if you go there from the US and you just show up and try to put your North American solutions to it, it doesn't work. So you definitely have to work with the communities. So definitely important. What are some examples of ethical AI and how can it be used? Because I know a lot of people talk about how AI is like unethical and it's using so much water and resources and all this. I'd like to hear your perspective.
I think it's something that's ever evolving and that we're all still trying to figure out, like, how do we use it as ethically as possible? And that's something that I've been kind of trying to understand and figure out over the past few months, just with the work that we do want to do with Understory too. We have we have a storytelling studio portion, which kind of does a lot of that, the social media, the magazine, the documentary that we're working with. And then we have the labs where we want to create and innovate and use a lot of this knowledge and wisdom to actually create climate solutions and collaborate with brands and be a bit more of that B2B model. And so for us, it's like, okay, well, how can we use AI ethically? And there's a few conversations that I had recently, and even like a book that I'm currently reading called, and it was interesting. It was like on my travels that I was gifted this with someone that we were staying. And I don't think this is very like widely available. I have no idea. But it's called The Creative Uprising: Igniting a Revolution in the Age of Tech Feudalism, which sounds a little, like a lot, but it basically talks about how a lot of us are creative entrepreneurs and how we can, in some ways, create a new system and challenge big tech in the way that they're using AI. And it has a lot about ethical AI frameworks and just how you can set those up. So I'm currently exploring this and understanding, okay, how can we have that creative uprising and collectively do some good work together. But in terms of ethics, I think, at least from a storytelling perspective, I was at Cannes Lions a few months ago now, I think like mid-June, and I heard the CEO of Cloudflare, Matthew Prince, speak about how to make AI more ethical. And then he was talking about how so many people are like obviously not compensated for their writing or their art or whatever it is that they've created. And there's a lot of, media like Vox Media or Time, for example, a lot of these media sources that are now signing deals with these AI companies so that people can utilize, the things that they've printed and the things that they've created and get paid. And so he's basically talking about being able to create larger scale methods of compensation to anyone who's either contributing to that media or collaborating with these AI companies. So that's like the way in where people can get more ethically compensated and perhaps even credited. But a lot of that work, I think, does have to come from the top. And then, of course, from the frameworks that you might be implementing with the AI that you're using, it does take a lot of water, does take a lot of energy. And it's really about, at least through Understory, like understanding where does it make sense to use and how can we use it to help us brainstorm better or help us understand things that we might not have known or not have seen if we didn't have that lens, but not use it entirely to replace creativity or replace our writing or replace the human essence that is so important, that is especially important in spaces like climate and human rights. So it's really like treading and finding that balance of not using AI for everything, but using it to spark something that you otherwise might have not realized, or check something that you otherwise might have not known. But that's kind of my approach. And I'm hoping that even from the top, we're going to see better models of credit and compensation. And I think those are hopefully on the way from what I've heard.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially the compensation. There's been articles about how people are using AI to write books, and a lot of the books and writing are taken from other authors, sometimes pages from other people's writing and turning into their own. So yeah, I think that's so important for entrepreneurs and writers and artists to work with these companies. I think that gives us some hope that, that obviously, like AI is still pretty new, but as time goes on, it is something that's going to be integrated in so many things. I mean, it's even used in Google. Like sometimes you don't even have a choice. You search something in Google, it'll literally pop up. As like I did be asked for you to search it through using AI, but it's like running a lot of things on the back end and on the internet now, and it's going to be used for so many more things and a lot of jobs being replaced. So I do think, as with everything, we always have to use it thoughtfully and mindfully, because it can help us, especially as creators who often burn out because we just, like a lot of us are working full-time jobs, but we're doing this on the side. It can help us sometimes with editing or videos. And I think that that's so helpful, especially as a new mom. I think that's been really helpful. So I do think that there is a place for AI, that the human aspect is still very important, like you said. And I think that something should not go away ever. So we definitely, with many things, balance is very key. So this is the last part, setting sail. So tell us, Niha, what's next for you? I know you have your two organizations and your full-time job and content creation. You did talk about your documentary. Is that where you're going to go?
Yeah, I think the future for me is really to build out Understory. It actually started with this idea of the documentary where I wanted to actually create like a travel show. And I wanted to like travel to different countries, and I wanted to experience and showcase like a lot of the climate solutions that were happening in like underrepresented regions within those countries too. And then I was like, okay, let me pump the brakes and figure out, what makes the most sense in terms of the way to tell these stories. And I think it needs to be community led. I think the travel show would have been fun because it would have been maybe a little more
That sounds so
mainstream.
fun. Oh my gosh.
But start with an MVP and let's do like a short film and see how that ends up going. And then from there, use that to spark more short films, or maybe a season of multiple short films, maybe even a larger documentary, and just tell these stories around the world and keep traveling and keep doing it. That's kind of how I got the idea to do those. And then from there, we're like, wait, why don't we just build Understory and have this be like a project underneath there, and then build out a lot of other either awareness driven or action driven campaigns and projects that can all exist underneath this. And so I think that's where I'm just very excited to just build out what Understory can be and like take it beyond just the documentary, or, start building out the labs portion of it and start building out a beautiful community portion. And we even recently, as part of Tega, in collaboration with a few other Indigenous brands in India, we did a museum exhibition that's currently on display for 2 months in the National Craft Museum of Delhi. And it's like Indigenous fashion archives. We've all created a few pieces and a few art installations. And so through Understory, we're also telling the stories of all of these different Indigenous tribes and communities that have created this. So we just want to do like really cool things like that. And I think that's currently what is up for me next. So yeah, very excited.
That's amazing. And I was going to ask, like, how do you guys get the funding for like making a documentary, for example? Is it something that you just pour your own money into, or do you guys have to like apply for grants and stuff?
We've been applying for a few grants and currently pouring my own money. So I'm lucky that I work a 9 to 5 because I'm able to take some of that money even like through my content creation, I've really divested a lot of what I've earned from there into Tega, into Understory, which, makes me feel a little bit better about the where I'm putting the money that I'm earning. But at the same time, yes, we are applying to grants and also that's kind of why we ended up creating this hybrid model of we want their storytelling studio and we want our labs because we do want to have like a nonprofit portion, which would be this more storytelling studio, and then a for-profit, which would be the labs, and then they can kind of fund each other, and we're able to tell those stories eventually with other sources of income. But that's the goal and plan right now.
That's awesome. Can you explain a bit more about the labs? I feel like I missed.
Yeah, sure. I know. I feel like I didn't explain it super well, but it's currently being built in stealth, but we do want to create a B2B model with different businesses, almost like a SaaS model, offering a marketplace or services on how they can afford the materials that they're using and onboard regenerative materials from all of the communities that we interact with and kind of build this material lab for them. That's just the very beginning. So we're trying to get hopefully some letters of intent, things like that, signed by a few brands and just really accelerate the way that they are innovating within their supply chains. Cause I think that's like some of the issue or the main issue is like actually being able to make those switches the way that Ani, for example, has done. So that's one way. And then we're also bringing the storytelling aspect and telling stories of other just impactful sustainable companies that are working. And so we're also creating content and storytelling around that. So those are a few ways that we're kind of generating some revenue there.
That's awesome. I have not a lot of knowledge in that area, but I think, yeah, like big companies need to really work on their supply chain. So you can help them with that work and also get funding for your projects. That's a double win. So do you have a call to action for someone just discovering your work? What's the first step you like them to take beyond like just following you on your social media platforms?
Yeah, I would say a great call to action would be, a few things. I think you can definitely start, educating yourself. That's really the first step in a lot of this is, if you started following my work, you can watch my videos. You can also find other creators that I've collaborated with and just educate yourself on like the different facets of kind of sustainability and see how you can incorporate it into something that you're personally passionate about. I think I've just noticed that people tend to do the best with what they're the most interested in, using that lens to make an impact and a change. So that's usually what I encourage as a first step is, work within the passion that you have and see how you can intersect that with sustainability or climate. And then, of course, also just seeing if there's other organizations that you can get involved with, whether it's online, whether it's in person. Like Remake, for example, has been a beautiful community that I've been engaging with in New York, and they help advocate for garment worker rights and bills and things like that that can just help get better wages and hold big companies accountable as well. So I think working with those organizations are also really helpful, just kind of get outside of your comfort zone. But yes, there's still a lot of ways to kind of take action within the comfort of your own home too, right? Educating yourself, doing what you can within your own means, making sure that, you're advocating and being hopefully, an upstanding citizen, being able to like vote and do the things that are within your means too. So it's really like there's a lot of places to start, but I think educating yourself and finding your modality to which in the way which you want to get involved is definitely the first step.
Yeah, education is so important. And I feel like that's where a lot of content creators that we know really focus on because, not everyone can go to university and study environmental studies, for example, or sustainability. I think it is a privilege in a way that I think that's so important. Yeah, there's so many ways to get involved. Like you said, so many organizations out there need help, whether you're giving your time, your money, every little bit helps. All right, so the last two questions here. So what legacy do you want to leave? I know it's a big topic that
Should give a quick answer.
that's okay. That's okay. We're
I'd
humans.
say the legacy I want to leave is one of hopefully, through Understory, just being able to mobilize and build an incredible community that is super reciprocal and a place where we all really feel like we're encouraged to share our stories and take action and feel connected with each other. I think I really want to create a legacy of like connection in this world of feeling very disconnected and doing it through storytelling and shared passions. And for me, I feel like Understories is my modality of doing that, but I definitely want to leave that legacy of creating connections between people and even just between the things that we think might be so far disconnected or removed. So yeah, I want to do that. Hopefully we'll be able to do it through Understory.
That's amazing. And yeah, I feel like you're definitely going to leave legacy with the work that you're doing, especially with your organizations that you're putting so much work and effort into, the communities that you are like working with. I think that's so important. So last but not least, where can we find you? I know you have a website, your social media.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I guess Instagram is where you'll find me the most. So you can find me on Instagram at Niha Elety, so Niha and then Elety. Same thing for my website. It's it's nihaelety.com. I do have a LinkedIn, which I do need to flesh out more. I know a lot of people are like starting to be LinkedIn influencers now. I'm like, let me see like how I can
Yes.
store that. But those are a few. And then even the collective and understory, I have Instagram handles for those. So it's just at Tega Collective and at understory.org on that. And then respectively, the websites are also there for those. So you can really find me on all of those platforms.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Niha. My son's coming down because I have to put him to sleep.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Thoughtful Advocate. If this episode sparked something in you, leave a review, share it with a friend, leave a review, or tag us on Instagram at The Thoughtful Advocate. As always, I'd love to hear from you if this resonated, and I'd love to hear who do you like to hear from next, whether that's a guest you've been wanting to hear their real story from. Till next time.
Okay, so today's sponsor is Kind Laundry. Just kidding, they're not really a sponsor, but I do have an affiliate code. Kind Laundry use natural ingredients, and it actually comes in these sheets. So much more useful than liquid laundry detergent because that stuff gets messy. With Kind Laundry, you can bring this anywhere. It's literally in a box, pack in your suitcase, and it's that easy. You can get 10% off by using code ZeroWasteCute.